I had been homeless for 2 years when I found the Shady Acre apartments complex. Before that, I had been sleeping under roadways and behind dumpsters, which were some of the lowest points in my life. Having found the mostly completed apartments, being abandoned before they were officially completed was like hitting the jackpot for someone like me. Tucked away in a cleared lot nestled against the woods on the slower part of town, the Shady Acres were a complex for newer families and lower-income individuals, but somehow it found itself never being finally completed. The walls were not painted, and the flooring were not installed, but aside from the minor features, the place was practically livable. Of course, the electric wasn't working alongside the water and plumbing, but as the saying goes, beggars can't be choosers. I peeked my head inside as I entered the first floor. Tools, materials, and odds and ends still laid strewn about, as if someone was going to come back to finish the job, or at least clean up their mess, but it appeared that no one ever did. I grabbed a sizable pipe laying on the ground just in case. Homeless people, if startled, can and will turn violent very quickly. I did a brief inspection of the main floor, peeking my head inside of ways to confirm that I was alone in a substantially sized building, but sure enough, I couldn't find anyone else. As I inspected the main floor, I found a stairway. A metal door once stood in the way, but now laid on the ground. It was clear that someone damaged it with some type of tool in order to keep it open. I went to the stairway and looked inside. The natural light provided by the sun, aided by the many open windows, could only spill over so much. Inside was a set of stairs, going but both upwards and down below. I didn't have a flashlight, but what little natural sun entered the stairway was just enough to give me the courage to explore upwards, giving off just enough light to give me courage to see the second floor. I went up the metal stairs quietly, so as to not alarm anyone else to my presence here. The second floor was nearly identical to the first. I walked down the halls gripping the pipe, ready to defend myself from an unknown attacker. Again, much like the first floor, I didn't see anyone. However, I did find troubling signs of people having lived here at one point. I saw an old mattress littered with trash and old cigarettes. Clothes tossed in a pile in the corner of the room. Several dark stains covered the floor, and one splattered on the wall next to the head of the mattress. My heart sank. It was more than likely something sinister had been committed here. I was going to turn to leave, but alongside the disheartening evidence of someone being here, I found a flashlight and an old pistol. I took both and checked the gun to see 3 bullets remaining in the cylinders. I was going to leave, but seeing now that I had a gun and a flashlight, this changes things. The flashlight worked perfectly, emitting a strong blue LED light on the stained wall when I clicked it on. I still kept the pipe with me as a backup, but the pistol was now gripped firmly in my right hand. The second floor had bits and pieces of trash here and there, but nothing as concerning than what was in that one room. I entered the stairwell with my flashlight guiding me. Unlike the first 2 floors, the third floor had an actual door standing at the entrance. Lucky for me, the handle turned slowly and granted me access. A quick inspection of the door revealed a marvelous find. This door could be locked from the inside. If this floor was clear, this would be a magnificent setup. I could lock the door and prevent any vagrants much like myself coming up here and killing me in my sleep. All I would have to do is verify that the floor was clear, and I would be all set. The third floor had varied greatly from the first 2. No bits of drywall on the floor or discarded nails laying haphazardly. There still was electricity, but nothing my new flashlight couldn't handle. The floor was unfinished but oddly clean, as if it was getting prepped for carpet or new flooring before this place shut down. I cleared each room slowly, making sure to check every closet and cupboard before finally letting my guard down. I went back to the stairway and locked the door to prevent anyone else from coming up. I picked a room facing the parking lot, that way I could look out and see if anyone was coming. I spent the rest of the day in my newfound home. The flashlight and gun were an amazing find, but that unsettling sight of the blood-stained floor and walls was something that still concerned me. Maybe it was something else. Perhaps someone spilled something and it just looked bad. I thought to myself, trying to not freak myself out so much. The thought also crept into my mind about how I yet to inspected the basement and what horrors lurked down there. For being homeless, I was fairly paranoid. I made myself a game plan for tomorrow that I would go out and find cheap furniture and food to fill my bare-bone apartment. It would take several trips, but well worth the effort. Nighttime and boredom eventually found me. I sat in the corner of the room, trying to get comfortable and let sleep carry me into tomorrow, but it was difficult. Sure enough, I managed to fall asleep, but staying asleep was another story. I woke up in the middle of the night. I didn't have anything to check the time with, but it was several hours before the sun would be rising. I got up, feeling the urge to go to the bathroom. This complex didn't have running water, so I would have to go outside to relieve myself. I grabbed the gun and flashlight and walked over to the starry way and unlocked the door. I went down the 2 flights of stairs and walked out back to go to the bathroom. The back of the complex was as neglected as the complex itself. Tall weeds filled the field that stretched out to the dark trees. Moonlight was scarce, and a cool chill breezed over me as I went to the bathroom. I glanced at the complex as I did my business. Anxiety had yet to find me as I was still sleepy. I could hear cars off in the distance from the nearby highway, but no animal life could be heard. It was probably too cold for them, I thought, as I pulled my pants up and made my way inside. I entered the hollow shell of the first floor. Stealth was not my main concern, seeing as that sleep was my only goal. I entered the stairway, ready to ascend back up to my room of safety, when I stopped. For the briefest of moments, I could have sworn I heard what sounded like mumbling down below. My flashlight was on, but I didn't dare shine it down into the basement. In fact, a moment curiosity washed over me as I turned my light off and listened in the stairway. I gripped the gun as I stepped over to the stairs that led downwards. My suspicions were confirmed as I felt my way down a step or two to hear more clearly the rambling of someone down here. I paused for a moment, unsure of what to do. Whoever was down here sounded as if they were speaking, and no one else was responding. Perhaps a mentally ill person took shelter down here. I walked back up the stairs silently as the soft mumblings of whoever was down there slowly faded beneath the stairs. I was fairly fit and mentally strong, so having an interaction with anyone would be more likely in my favor. I made it to the 3rd floor, and the sound was no longer existent. It was clear that the distance between us had enough cushion to drown out the sounds from either of us, which was relieving. I made sure to lock the door to the stairway before heading back to my room. Although the realization I wasn't alone in this building was brief and honestly quite harmless, it made finding sleep all the more difficult. I don't know if I slept much that night, but I woke up feeling very tired. I got up and glanced out the window to see the complex parking lot empty and the sun beaming over the distant trees. I unlocked the stairway door and went down the stairs and outside. I spent the day in town getting things ready for my new place. The local thrift store had a cheap air mattress that I purchased, but it didn't come with a pump. I loaded up with other essentials like huge gallon-sized jugs of water and food that was easy to make or didn't require power. After making a trip or two back to the empty complex, my room was decent enough for me to not have to worry about it for a week or so. The only thing I wasn't able to work out was the bathroom situation, which would require me to go down the sets of stairs and out back facing the woods. I was going to go in the basement later that day, but got caught up doing other things, and by the time I was available, the sun had set. This wouldn't affect the actual lighting of the basement, obviously, but I didn't want to face whatever was down there and come up to a pitch-black night. Besides, Whoever was down there didn't seem aware of me or my setup, and that was enough comfort for me to leave that problem to another day. I made sure to use the bathroom around back before going back up to my room. I didn't want to have to make the hike in the middle of the night again. While I was using the restroom, I peered out into the woods several hundred yards away. I wasn't sure how long I would be able to keep up the abandoned apartment situation, so I briefly considered checking out the woods as a backup if I were to be found out. Again, that would be another task that I would save for daylight. The woods seemed just as terrifying as the dark basement below. I went back inside, flashlight in hand. As I approached the stairwell, I noticed that on the ground, dark streaks of a mysterious liquid leading down the stairs. The stains mixed with the unfinished floor looked ominous. It was hard to tell what exactly it was, but didn't like what I was seeing. I turned my light off as I entered the stairway, as to not alert who was below. I made sure to be quiet, but my pace was quicker than what it probably should have been. I opened the third floor door and locked it behind me. I did a quick inspection of the third floor as a safety precaution, but everything looked how I left it. I was tired from all the walking. Mainly having to carry all my stuff around and setting up my room took all my energy. I laid on my air mattress and closed my eyes, trying not to think about anything as sleep began to grab hold of my consciousness when a faint noise jarred me awake. It was subtle, but my mind being on high alert was able to detect movement down below. Normally, I wouldn't have heard whatever was down beneath rummaging around, but since the complex didn't have windows to insulate the noise, I could clearly hear the sound of someone walking around. The shuffling wasn't terribly loud, but whatever it was clearly working its way up the complex. What concerned me wasn't the noise itself, but rather how things sounded. There was a hint of stealth in the movements, like whoever it was didn't want to be detected. I followed the sounds beneath me as I laid in darkness. I lost track of where they had went when they were over near the stairwell. I sat up on my mattress and looked in the direction of the stairwell. Did I lock the door to the stairs? I thought. I had been so busy that day that it was very likely I forgot. I got up slowly, doing my best to keep my sound low. In my hurry, I only brought my flashlight to guide me through the dark halls. I quickly made it to the stairway door and tugged on the handle. I had remembered. I breathed a sigh of relief and turned my light off. I sat by the door, my nerves slowly getting worked up. I need to stop overthinking, I whispered, as I sat in silence after spending 15 minutes trying to locate the sound beneath me. I was ready to get up and head back to my bed when a jostling of the door handle startled me. Someone was outside of the door. A brief rustling on the handle shocked my anxiety as I sat in darkness. I could hear someone talking to themselves, but the handle had stopped shaking. Whoever was on the other side had stopped their attempt to gain entry, but still stood outside the door. I stared at the door, petrified of what would happen if the door lock no longer held. Would it be just another person like me, seeking refuge and wanting to spend the night with a roof over their head, or was this something else? The person on the other side of the door left the door almost immediately, but still stayed within the complex. Fear gripped me to that door, not allowing me to move. It was clear that this building had another uninvited guest, but that wouldn't last. As I was debating on how to proceed, I heard another sound, but this one didn't come from the other side of the door, but beneath me. The piercing sound of a shriek filled the complex. Whoever had the misfortune of finding themselves on the lower levels began to shuffle around. They tried to get to the first floor, but I could hear a struggle, then more screaming coming from the stairway. The sound of commotion erupted. Screams of pain and terror echoed up the stairwell, but not for long. The screams quickly died, and the sound of something being dragged slowly faded down into the basement below. I couldn't be sure, but it sounded as if I just heard a murder take place. I sat by the stairway all night, eyes wide. I couldn't bring myself to calm down enough to enjoy the luxury of sleep. When the sun finally rose, I found the courage to get up and head to my room. I didn't go outside that day, despite having the urgent need of using the bathroom. I ended up using an empty room and designated that as my bathroom area until I figured out how to get out of this place. I had enough food and water to last me a couple of days, so I had time to figure out what I wanted to do. During the day, sleep finally overcame me, and I drifted to a realm of peace, but that wouldn't last. I woke up later in the day. The sun was completely smothered behind rain clouds, and loud rumblings of thunder rolled in the distance. I could hear a few droplets hit the roof and windowsill, a prelude of what was to come. The complex was much darker now. My flashlight was needed for just about everything. The day was only going to get darker, so I had to decide. Stay another night and hope that I can evade notice for 10 or so more hours, or sneak my way out of here. I grabbed the pistol and decided to try my luck. I packed up as much stuff as I could carry in one take and headed for the stairs. I made my way over to the door and unlocked it, my light beaming into the thick darkness below. I made sure to check the coast was clear before leaving my sanctuary. I slowly descended the stairs, doing my best to navigate the metal stairs while also keeping my noise down. I slowly completed the first flight of steps, and nothing seemed out of place. On the second floor, my fears had been confirmed. I could see drag marks leading to the stairs with stains accompanying it. I wanted to check the second floor, but my nerves wouldn't allow it. The drag marks continued down the step, leaving thick stain of blood and bits and pieces of guts. This wasn't just a killing, this was a mutilation. Whoever had done this was disturbed, and the last person I wanted to encounter in this dark stairway. I needed to leave. The rain had really begun to come down now. I would get soaked the second I stepped foot outside, but I had to do it. I was frustrated by those new developments, since I would not be able to hear as well if something was heading towards my direction. I worked my way down to the first floor, but halfway down, my light reached something at the bottom of the stairs that stopped me cold in my tracks. Standing in the corner of the stairway next to the exit stood an absolute horrid creature, stood hunched facing the corner. My light only caught the lower half of the figure before I turned off my light, but it was enough for me to piece it together. The brief moment of horror revealed something blocking my exit. Had it not been standing, I would have that it was rotted corpse. Flesh peeled from what limbs I could see, and bone appeared to jet out of the lower spine. I didn't get to see the rest of it, and I'm kind of glad I didn't. I held my breath as my heart began to race. I was immersed in darkness with whatever this thing was, about a dozen or so feet away from me. Rain and thunder continued outside now, thankfully concealing my sound. I couldn't see anything, but what little I could hear, it didn't sound like it had moved. I stood petrified on the stairs, knowing fully well I wasn't going to make it out of here this way, at least in one piece. In moments like this, you don't really think clearly. You can only think of survival and nothing else. I had never seen anything like this before. I wasn't sure what kind of gun I had, or if it would even affect this creature in any meaningful way, but I wasn't going to test it. I began to backstep up the stairs awkwardly. My hands were full, and my heavy pack made the unnatural back pedaling even more difficult. I went for another step back when my shoe didn't clear the step, and I fell backwards. Out of reaction, I dropped my gun and flashlight to brace myself, reaching out for non-existent handle rails to catch my fall. The thud of the heavy flashlight on the metal stairs clamored loudly as it fell down the stairs, echoing in the stairwell. I gasped. A shock of anxiety and dread flooded my system. Without a doubt, I had gained the attention of whatever lurked just beneath me. I dropped my backpack to lighten my load and felt around for the gun. Shrieks filled the complex as an odd twist of event. It would appear that I had startled whatever was down there. I could hear shuffling beneath me. Its attention focused briefly on the flashlight that came to a stop, buying me precious time to find my only weapon to defend myself. I felt around, my hands patting the ground, feeling the still wet stains of the drag marks from earlier. I was so focused on finding the gun, I hadn't noticed the creature was no longer interested in the flashlight and had begun ascending the stairs. Finally, I felt something solid and gripped it tightly. It took me a few moments to orient myself with the weapon, but before I could, I was tackled on the ground. Immediately, I felt sharp pain in my side as I was now being attacked. I could feel claws begin to slash on my outer coat and heavy pressure on my chest. I pressed the barrel in the direction I heard shrieking and felt something solid. I pulled the trigger 3 times, and my hand knocked back from the power. The gun bursts briefly illuminated the area, and flashes of images haunted my vision. I could briefly see in those very few moments what appeared to be a decomposing demon. It was so quick, and I was in so much pain that I wasn't able to process everything right then. The pressure relieved off my chest, as it seemed I had injured my attacker. However, I still heard movement squirming around on the ground and loud, horrifying screams. I left the gun and my backpack with stuff and ran past the sounds of shuffling. I went to the stairs and went as quickly as I could without falling in the dark. The pain in my side seemed to disappear as adrenaline began to pump into my system. I made it to the first floor and I kicked the flashlight that I had dropped earlier. I picked it up and turned it on and ran out of there. I left the complex with whatever that was still screaming inside. The warm rain slowly drenching me the further I jogged away. The screams never did stop. They just muffled the further I went off into the dark, rainy night. As I got a good distance away, a part of me considered looking back to see if my demonic attacker was pursuing me, but not looking back would be a risk I was willing to take. My family and I have been going through a very strange experience over the last couple of months. It's hard to even put into words or explain what is going on. I guess I can just start off from where it all started to feel off. A few months back, my family had a big get-together. My parents both have 2 siblings. They all got married and had some kids. Well, all of them except Uncle Matt. He never got married or had kids. That means I have 10 cousins. My aunts and uncles all live within 2 hours of us, so we've all grown up together. That being said, we don't normally have all my aunts and uncles in a house at once. This was a rare occasion to have a family meal when they were all free. I will not be naming every single family member in this post, because that seems like a lot of information, and honestly, you've already gotten more information about my family than you ever wanted. But I promise this context is important. Okay. Enough with my babbling. Let's talk about what happened that weird night. My parents and I went over to my Aunt Margot and Uncle Ken's house for a BBQ in the backyard. The backyard felt loud and chaotic. I tried to stay out of the way and get the night over with. I was honestly just there for the free food. We were all sitting down at a big table outside. I was so focused on making sure none of the napkins went flying in the wind, I wasn't listening to the conversation. My Aunt Margot came over to the table with a plate of really burnt hot dogs. My mom immediately started to laugh at the sight of them. Is burning food genetic or something? How on earth do you guys always do that to food? The Jensens need to leave the cooking to the Millers, my mom said with a sarcastic giggle. Uncle Ken looked at her confused. What are you on about, Liz? Uncle Ken snapped back. I mean, Margot burnt the hot dogs, and Matt always burns food when he cooks. Remember, we had to ban him for months from cooking because we had to order takeout like 3 times in a row. Everyone at the table laughed, recalling their memories. Sighs of recollection bounced back and forth from person to person when my dad spoke up in Aunt Margot's defense. Honey, what are you talking about? Matt is your brother. I really shouldn't have to remind you of that. My mom rolled her eyes in response to my dad. I spoke up because I was suddenly confused about which side of the family Uncle Matt was actually on. You would think I would naturally just know that, but all my aunts and uncles act like siblings and call each other their siblings. My grandparents often refer to their son-daughter-in-laws as just their kids, so it isn't something I always think about. Wait, I'm confused. Whose side is Uncle Matt on? What is the joke? I don't get it, I asked, but was only met with a laugh from all the parents at the table. I finally got an answer from my mom, following the silence of the joke that somehow went over my head. Don't be silly, baby. Matt is your dad's brother. As the words left her mouth, half the table looked confused. Liz, what are you talking about? He is on your side. He is a Miller, my Aunt Margot said as she scraped off the burnt edges of her hot dog. Okay, now I'm with Amanda. I don't get the joke, my mom said while looking at me with narrow, inquisitive eyes, and then at the rest of the group. Wait. Everyone slow down, Aunt June said, speaking up for probably the first time in the night. This is dumb. Matt is not Liz and I's brother. He has to be on the Jensen side of the family. I sat at the table watching my family in silence. Their eyes darted back and forth. They stopped laughing and were all just scratching their heads. After a few minutes, my mom got out her phone. She found an old family photo from when she was a kid. In the photo were her, my grandparents, my Uncle Paul, and my Aunt June. Nothing out of the ordinary. After looking at the picture, Aunt Margot got out her phone and looked for an old childhood photo. Aha, found one, she stated as she showed off the photo on her phone. Yet again, the photo was normal. It had my grandparents, my dad, Aunt Margot, and Aunt Susan. The next hour consisted of both sides of the family going back and forth showing photos. None of them with Uncle Matt in them. I had a few of my cousins there, but they all lost interest once they ate. I, on the other hand, couldn't be pulled away. I was engrossed in learning where the heck Uncle Matt came from. They kept talking back and forth. They figured maybe he wasn't anyone's sibling. Maybe he was related by marriage, or a second cousin twice removed that I just called Uncle Matt, because that was the easiest thing to call him. We all have a relative like that, right? I know an easy solution you might be thinking of is to just call him up. That's also what I said, but he was working and they didn't want to interrupt him. But guess what? I needed answers, so I decided to call him. However, when I looked at my phone, I couldn't find him. In my contacts, I looked through it multiple times. I remembered texting him about something a few days back, so he should have been in my text history. Still nothing. After being weirded out by his contact being gone, I mentioned out loud that someone should call him, regardless of him being at work. No one agreed with me, but once I told them his contact was missing from my phone, they all got curious and looked to see if he was missing for them too. We were all in shock to find him missing from all our phones. The family started to dig through their camera rolls and any digital libraries they had to try and find any photo of him. Uncle Andrew thought he had a photo of the back of him, but we soon found that we all remembered him looking differently. Uncle Andrew showed a picture of the back of a bald man who looked pretty tall. Aunt June called him crazy and recalled him having long curly red hair. It wasn't like we hadn't seen him in a year or that he was some kind of distant memory. I saw the guy last week. He came over to my house to help me with some homework, and I can tell you he didn't have red hair or no hair at all. He was, well, shoot. I can't remember what he looked like now that I think about it. It was safe to say we were all creeped out. As the sun went down and it got chilly out, the group moved inside. Normally, this is when everyone would go home, but I saw Aunt Margot start a pot of coffee. It was going to be a long night. The air was tense and full of unease. None of the adults wanted to go home until they had answers. I could tell the adults wanted to talk more but didn't want to worry the younger cousins. My older cousin Maddie clearly didn't care about anything that was going on. She just wanted to sleep. We convinced her to take my 3 young cousins into the basement so they could all get some sleep. But not me. I was invested. Uncle Matt and I are close. We see each other all the time. How could I not have a shred of evidence that he even existed? As my cousins shuffled downstairs, all the adults huddled around a big whiteboard. Aunt Margot slapped on the kitchen island. They started to write down everything they could remember. What he looked like, the last time they saw him, memories of him. None of it was coherent. It seemed he was a completely different person in all our memories, even if it was a memory where multiple people were around. One of the only things that we could all agree on was that the Jensens always thought he was on the Miller side of the family, and the Millers always thought he was on the Jensen side. My mom recalled a story of Matt and my dad going to a lake to fish, but the hook got stuck on Matt's hat and went flying. My dad told us he remembered my mom telling him the same exact story many times. Everyone had memories of stories where he was on the other side of the family. Soon, everyone was on the phone with a new family member, trying to tell them the situation and asking what they thought about everything. My aunts and uncles were talking to realities on the phone I didn't know I had. Relatives that probably only met Matt a couple times at best. All I heard was one dead end at a time. No one knew where he came from or where he went. So the big question was, who is Matt? Was he just some random guy who weaseled his way into the family, telling one side of the family one thing and the other side another? Or was it something so much worse? As the sun came up that Saturday morning, we were all still scratching our heads. The deeper we got into who Matt was, the more freaked out everyone got. I was honestly surprised they let me stay with them all night long. The more digging everyone did, the farther away we felt. The more rabbit holes we went down, the less real he seemed. We couldn't find any evidence that he ever existed. Some of us searched all over the internet for Matt Jensen or Matt Miller, and a few of us searched for other last names in the family. Of course, it was kind of hard to know who we were looking for, given we didn't know what he really looked like. After hours of discussion, we compiled a list of attributes that never wavered about Uncle Matt. He was a man. He never had a mustache. He was tall. He was bad at math. And he loved Jim Carrey movies. That might seem like a random grouping of facts, but that's because it was. We couldn't even remember where his house was. Some of us completely forgot, and others remembered different houses. It didn't matter. We weren't going to start knocking on doors to find a man we were concerned never existed. We started to believe that as soon as we began to question who he was, he just simply started to fade away into nothingness. Like it was some kind of self-destructive on his own consciousness. It was around 9 a.m. that morning when people started to fall asleep on couches. The night before started with everyone being determined and saying the night wouldn't end until we found Uncle Matt. But here we all were, exhausted and with little to no answers. It felt like accepting defeat by napping on the couch, but we couldn't do much else. At 11 a.m., we all woke up to the sound of my cousins playing in the next room over. We all sat up and rubbed our eyes. You could practically see the gears turning in everyone's heads as they woke up from their stupors. I could tell when they realized their memories actually happened, and it wasn't just a weird fever dream. My Aunt Margot stumbled to the kitchen while yawning and started to dig in the pantry for something substantial the kids could all eat. It was clear they had already raided the cookie stash. As the adults had a quiet conversation, we heard something come from my cousin Cass that made us freeze. Yeah, remember last night when Uncle Matt gave us all those cookies? It was so much fun, my small cousin said with a hop and a skip. Wait, Cass, get over here and say that again. My Uncle Andrew yelled in an attempt to sound intimidating, but came out with a voice crack. Cass walked over to us looking like a confused puppy who just got yelled at. What did I do wrong, Uncle Andrew? I thought if Uncle Matt offered us cookies, I could have them. Cass, you are not in trouble. This is very important. Are you telling me Uncle Matt was with you guys last night? Uncle Andrew tried to say in a gentle tone to not scare Cass. I mean, not the whole night, but he brought us all cookies and put a movie on for us. Then he said he wanted to go hang out with you guys upstairs, Cass told us with a quiet voice. Everyone started to frantically look around the room, looking for any evidence of him being there last night. We quickly asked the rest of the cousins if they saw Matt, and some kids did, and some didn't. I noticed something when I started to count the objects in the room. There were 10 adults and me upstairs last night, so there should have been 11 people in total. But I saw 12 plates out with the leftover crumbs from our late-night pizza, 12 spots laid out for sleeping in the living room, and 12 mugs or cups of coffee. He was here last night. As I mentioned what I found, my dad said he remembered seeing him last night. He said Matt brought him some water. Uncle Paul said he saw him go to the bathroom, but couldn't remember him coming out. They mentioned how it felt like it never actually happened, but he managed to place the memory in them after the fact. How else would they see Uncle Matt right in front of them and not realize what was happening? I had a strange feeling that started to bubble up. I felt uneasy and restless. Wait, something is off here, I said loudly to the room. Everyone line up on the wall. I want to try something. For a second, they all looked at me confused. They normally wouldn't let me boss them around like that, but they were desperate and tired. All the adults lined up against the wall. As I walked by then, I counted out loud. Something strange happened. I counted 12 people, including me. None of the kids were lined up. I wasn't counting myself twice. There was an extra person. Uncle Matt wasn't just here last night. He was with us in the room at that moment. Other members of the family even tried to count. We did it over and over again, even adding one of the kids to the mix. But every single time there was one extra person, but we still couldn't see him. How was he hiding in plain sight? Everyone ended up leaving my Aunt Margot's house that afternoon. We were all still extremely creeped out about the whole thing, but what could we do about it? Not much. It's not like Uncle Matt ever did anything violent. Mostly normal behavior, except for a few memories of him that were kinda weird. One of us remembered seeing him in the kitchen, stacking and unstacking bowls for hours. Another person remembered him once packing for a vacation, but his suitcase only had trash bags in it. And I have a memory of us sitting in front of a fireplace, with him reading the instruction manual to a blender for a bedtime story. At least those were the kind of memories we had in the beginning. As the weeks went on, we started to remember things that got more and more concerning. He showed up in our houses in the middle of the night, or buying us all hammers for Christmas. He once bought hundreds of dollars worth of knives and put them in my dad's car. Once we developed disturbing memories of him, we tried to tell the police. Of course, they couldn't find any evidence of his existence, so they couldn't help us. It didn't help our case that we couldn't even give them a last name. How on earth are they supposed to find a guy based on his name being Matt and no physical features? So who is Uncle Matt? I can say with 100% certainty, I have no clue. Is he a man? Is he an entity? Is he a figment of our imaginations? Or is he nothing at all? I don't know. And that's the worst part of all. He seems to always be around at family dinners. Most of the time, I count the number of people I end up with an extra person. He feels like a virus. Always implanting a memory of himself being around, but in the moment I never see him. It seems to be a family joke at this point. Always leaving out an extra plate for him or something. In my opinion, no one is taking this situation seriously. I know he hasn't hurt anyone, but why should we wait for something to happen? I swear I can feel it when he shows up. The hairs on the back of my neck stand up. My family has given up on trying to figure out who or what Uncle Matt is. But I haven't. It feels like they have all just forgotten the disturbing memories of him. I swear the deeper I dig to find him, the worse the memories get. Like he is rotting and festering in my memories, right before my eyes. I'm starting to think it's his attempt to stop me from looking for him. The fact that he is punishing me for looking for him makes my concern grow more and more. Why is he suddenly running now that I am onto him? Why is he so afraid of me finding him? And what will happen once I do find him? I will find you, Uncle Matt. I will find out what you are.